KFI AM 640. You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly. On demand on the iHeartRadio app.
I've been following Vintage LA ever since I moved here. Invaluable, entertaining resource for old photos, videos, lots more. And for me personally, it's been a way to see things when a deadly pandemic turned me into a real hermit for most of the time I've lived in LA. Maybe more than a lot of people, I admit. But I also love seeing old TV and movie locations, familiar faces from entertainment from back in the day, and now in their later years, catching up with them. And so much more than that. The human behind all of that is Alison Martino, and she is here with me in the studio. Alison, I have awful people radar, but you seem like such a fun person, and I could not be happier that you're here with me.
I'm very happy to be here.
Now, I feel like we've secretly been conjoined twins because we have so many of the same interests. I am especially into old Hollywood, old showbiz stories. I'm a collector of old movie posters, among other things. But first, we should cover the basics for people who aren't already fans of yours. Give us Vintage LA 101, please.
Vintage LA 101. It'll be 15 years that I started that page on Facebook, believe it or not. And I thought, a bunch of friends will join it from high school and we'll talk about places that aren't here anymore. And 15 years later, it's like 500,000 people. But really, all I do is start a subject about something in Los Angeles that isn't here, or maybe is here. And the thread just goes. And it feels so good to hear people's just living in Los Angeles. You can't learn this stuff in a textbook because the stories are coming from the community. And so that's great. Thousands of pictures are posted. I'd say there's, 10,000 pictures on there now, the last 15 years.
Yeah, I love the photos because it's before LA was all overbuilt and it just seemed like a spread out place. Here's something.
It's changed a lot.
Everything has. It's inevitable, but I love the old stuff, and I love watching old Rockford Files episodes and finding the locations here, and a lot of them are gone. But in fact, I drove to the, in Malibu, where his trailer was parked. It costs a lot just to park there and walk around. It's prohibitively expensive just to see a spot in a parking lot where a trailer was.
Uh-huh. Well, those shows have gotten more popular. And I think even through the pandemic, Columbo had more viewers than it ever had before. Everybody seemed to find it. And there's so much vintage LA in those shows.
Oh, well, I love Columbo. And I think Kino Lorber put out that box set at the time, and there was a big kerfuffle about that because for some legal reason they couldn't have any of the commentaries or bonuses on it, and it was a giant ripoff. I absolutely love Columbo and can quote some of them chapter and verse.
Okay, good. Well, I kind of pause it and watch it and see if things are still there. And there's a lot of shows in the 70s that were filmed in LA, a lot.
I don't think people really have a true sense of how much people saved money by just shooting stuff in the backyard here.
Right.
Vasquez Rocks shows up in Star Trek and every Western you've ever seen. And it is my goal when I actually get outside to go and have a photo on Vasquez Rocks like I'm Captain Kirk fighting the Gorn in the arena episode. But by the time I left Seattle, I was about coming up on 6 years ago, I was ready to go, partly because all the cool stuff that made Seattle, all the quirky stuff that gave it character and identity, it was disappearing. But you can't really say that about LA. There's a lot of stuff. It's a massive city, and it's a gold mine of old stuff still here.
You got to look for it a little bit more. But yes, I'd say there's still a lot left, and we're trying to preserve as much as we can and stop losing so many amazing structures like the Sunset Strip that's being currently stripped.
Oh, explain that. Can you talk about
I call it
that?
Sunset Strip. Yeah, it's completely different. I grew up not too far from the Sunset Strip, and I still live near the Sunset Strip, so it's very near and dear to my heart. But to see buildings that were kind of mascots of our city and familiar landmarks, familiar corners, are completely gone now.
House of Blues.
One of my
favorite haunts growing up.
And I'm sorry, for what? More overpriced condos. That's not fun.
No.
When you come to the Sunset Strip, you want to go to the Strip and you want to see entertainment. And they're stripping away all the entertainment. Luckily, places like the Whiskey and the Rainbow are landmarked, owned by the family that still own it. But now the Viper Room is in trouble.
Yes.
And that whole block is going to come down for another hotel.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in Seattle. All these old places were torn down and replaced with condos with a retail level on the ground floor because the people who owned like the old, Mama's Mexican Kitchen or whatever dive that we're talking about, maybe they wanted to retire and they couldn't turn down that kind of money because you're operating on a thin margin if you run a bar or a restaurant.
Well, when they say, well, we'll make the Viper Room a museum, then don't touch it. It is a museum.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. I mean, don't take it down. But it's very hard to fight city council.
That's
very
exactly
difficult.
what I was going to say.
It's very hard, and they're a little snarky, and they just,
Yeah.
Now,
They
I
don't like me very much.
suspect that you loved Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood every bit as much as I did. I think it's the best thing he's ever done, and I've watched it 2 or 3 times, and I'm going to watch it at least that many more times, and I read the book afterward.
You did good, yeah.
I think you are as much of an expert as anybody to talk about how well he captured that area it would be the late 60s because it was around the time of the Manson killings.
It was so astonishing to see him turn the streets back to 1969 in where those places were. That's what's amazing about it. Turning, the donut stand back to where it was, Peaches Records back to where it was. And then just having all the cars on the street, cruising, and just really fun. He let us watch. He let the residents and whoever wanted to watch those scenes.
Oh, wow.
So I went to like 5 or 6 different locations. And then when the movie came out, we really felt like we didn't know what it was about, because there was no way you were ever going to know the ending of that film till you saw it. But it was the closest thing to a time machine probably this city has ever seen.
Yeah, I really
He raised
felt
the bar
like
for a lot of films. They're going to be on location.
It rang true to me, that whole movie. And the ending, I thought was just magical because it was the exact same thing he did in Inglourious Bastards, which gave you a happy ending to something traumatic, and it was so satisfying. But I'm not sure everybody was on board with it. There are certain people who work here who really dislike that movie, and their opinions are completely worthless.
Wow.
I want them to know that.
Don't tell me who they are. I want to like them still.
Looking at the screen.
So
some people don't understand it. I remember being in the theater once going, why are we following this blonde lady around the whole time? I know. It's you have to, I think, really want that ending and it makes you cry. It makes you laugh. It makes you get up and cheer. It makes you just go, if only. It's everything you want it to be and what you wanted it to be if it could have been. Right?
And if you like all those old shows from that period, I think I mentioned to you. So the character of Rick Dalton in the movie has a guest shot in an FBI episode.
I love it, right. With Burt Reynolds is the real one.
Yeah. So of course I went and I watched that immediately afterward. And then I couldn't stop watching FBI episodes.
Yes.
So I watched like 2 seasons. And back in the late 60s, a season was around 30 episodes long. So that's a lot of time. But I loved every second of it.
And he copied that episode to a T. I mean, it's astonishing to see how meticulous he is.
Yeah, he was a savant.
But this was his love letter to LA, especially the scene where Brad is driving and you see the big neon sign sort of above him. That was Quentin's view of LA when he was younger in the back of the seat of his parents' car.
Well, he got so many other little things, too. I mean, his eye for detail is incredible. I am a horror nerd. And
I know you're going to say.
During the brief period I lived here when I was, 5, 6, 7 years old. I can't remember exactly. And my mom isn't around to ask. But I recall being traumatized by a late-night horror show host called The Sinister Seymour when I was up by myself and I wasn't supposed to be watching things. They had a Sinister Seymour clip in this movie.
They sure did.
It's such a deep cut. And of course, that leads you down a rabbit hole. So you'll find a documentary about him on YouTube with his surviving family members. Was there anything else in it that stood out to you?
You have to see it at the New Beverly. When you see it again, go see it at Quentin's Theater. Because it's like a Rocky Horror Picture Show experience because the people who see that film know that film. They're like us. It feels like a club. It's like a private club in there. And they know every line and we're screaming and stuff. But, just to hear the music, even though we've heard all these songs before, I did feel like I was hearing them for the first time because the characters are hearing them for the first time in the car.
My favorite LA night, and again, I haven't been out much since the pandemic, but my favorite LA night is a movie at the New Beverly because they show old cult films all on film, 35 millimeter, followed by some drinks and some food at El Coyote right down the block. What is your favorite LA night?
Well, that you just named it.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I've done that several times. I'm a creature of habit. I like old places. I love Dan Tana's. I love Mousson Frank. I kind of go to the same 10 places, but lately I've been hitting the dive bars. I know we're going to talk about that later.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
We're back with Alison Martino, the mastermind behind Vintage LA. Alison, please list all the joints where people can find your content, your Vintage LA stuff.
Well, everywhere. Every platform. It's either going to be under my name, Alison Martino, or Vintage Los Angeles.
But you have a Facebook page.
Yes.
As well as a Twitter X feed.
Yeah. All under either Alison Martino, but Vintage LA on Facebook and Instagram are my babies.
Okay, so those two things. Now, you have done a feature for, is it Spectrum? Is that correct?
Yes, I've been on Spectrum for about 5 years. It's been a true gift, being able to report about places that I love and frequent all over town. And usually they have historic stories behind them. And I did pitch a series earlier this year about vintage bars and dive bars. And it's been really fun to go in and shoot there and get the stories. A lot of these places are going on 50, 60 years, some of them even 80 years.
Oh, wow. Well, it is my pleasure to live exactly down to the newspaper man stereotype and focus on the dive bars. Of course, LA Confidential is one of my favorite movies, and I've been to the Formosa. Is that on your list?
I've done the Formosa twice for Spectrum.
Look at what a pro you are.
Oh, yeah. I was there opening night because, they were down for a while. We didn't think they were going to come back, and my friend Bobby Green brought it back. So we were there for the opening, and that was fabulous.
And is that with us now for the duration?
Yes. It's spectacular. I mean, they put it back exactly how it probably looked in the 1930s, but better than it ever looked.
And you walk in there and you see some bimbo cut to look like Lana Turner. And she throws a drink in your face.
Yeah, I mean, it is walking into a time capsule. I mean, I don't even think set designers could make it look that good. I mean, it really is a time capsule. But some of the ones I just shot at Shay J, which is incredible. Have you ever been there?
No, tell me about that.
Well, because you have to learn.
Yes.
You need my help. This is why my show is good. Well, that's in Santa Monica. But you have been to Frolic Room.
I've driven past it.
Okay, next to the Pantages.
Yeah,
so that's,
right. Tell me about the
when you're
Frolic
talking
Room.
about doing like a night where you go to a movie and dinner, like two things, you can go to the Frolic Room for a drink and then hit the Pantages. They're right next to each other. And by the way, there's scenes of that in LA Confidential.
Yeah, I feel like Bud and Ed walked into the Frolic Room and got into some mischief. What else is on your list?
The Blue Room in North Hollywood.
Okay.
And it's not far from here. Shall we go?
I was thinking.
Yeah, shall we go?
The nightcap after.
It's
got
tempting.
one of the greatest old signs. That's one of the great things I love about old bars are the signs and the cozy booths inside. And they're dives. They're small, and they get the locals. They have the stories.
So if somebody like me walked in there like, hey guys, look at this fun local dive bar, I'd be risking my life.
Well, it's not just dive bars. It's a bar with, I kind of like counter eating. Like, I love a counter.
Yeah.
And it's like you can go into a restaurant. Some of them have a bar in the restaurant, like Dan Tana's. There's like a bar. So you could sit at the bar and eat. And some people like that. I do.
But if you've got regulars, like when I lived in Seattle, I lived around the corner from the best dive bar in the world. It was called the Tin Hat, and you had all the regulars, and I was one of them. And when a new person came in, it's like a scene out of the Old West in a saloon when somebody comes in wearing clothes that are a little too fancy, and you think, well, they're going to get messed up before they leave.
I don't know your wardrobe. I don't know. You might have to go with me. I might have a little advantage because I put them on the air, but I think you'll be okay.
Okay.
HMS Bounty. Have you ever been there?
Oh my gosh.
Somebody knows what I'm talking about.
Let me tell you why I say, oh my gosh.
Please.
I live near HMS Bounty. It's one of my favorite restaurants. I blanked on the name sitting here because I'm thinking of all these other places. Yes. And I'm literally on my phone right now, Googling my address and like keywords. HMS Bounty is one of my favorite places.
You live there. And how about the Prince?
And the Prince.
See,
all of that right
now, don't
there
you think
in that area.
Mark has a shot going into those places?
You should.
Are these bars that would be featured on Grindr? What are you trying to say?
Not quite, unless you are into the nautical theme, then which, yes. But you should totally go to HMS Bounty.
You should take him.
Fantastic baseball steak. Now we're going to cause the line to be out the door.
I
It's amazing.
love that baseball steak.
Yeah.
You're the only one that knows that. What I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
All right, now I have to ask you, as a dive bar fan, what is generally the tattoo to tooth ratio in these places?
I have tattoos, but I have all my teeth, so
pretty strong.
You're ahead of the game. Yeah. All right,
Come
but
on.
it can be hit
little
and miss.
seedy. Not there. It's very old LA.
It's old. Yeah, it's like walking into 1945.
It is.
you know?
Okay, there's one more I wanted to ask about. What about the baked potato?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Is it now? Okay.
Are you kidding? Have you been there?
No, not yet. I
Well,
want to.
it's owned by Don Randy, who was in the Wrecking Crew, who probably backed every single record you've heard the Wrecking Crew.
I only know the Dean Martin, Matt Helm Wrecking
I'm gonna
Crew.
we have to.
educate them. This is why you have your show.
We need a few days here.
This was an errand of mercy on
Well,
your
that's
part.
a whole other show, but yes, the baked potato is a gem right here on Ventura Boulevard, and they have live music. And Don Randy's one of the greatest keyboard players in the world, who's been playing on every session record back in the '60s.
And they have karaoke there.
They have karaoke,
right?
but live music is pretty the way to go.
And potatoes.
And potatoes, you absolutely get a potato.
They're literally they specialize in potatoes.
Their signage is true. It's the baked potato.
Well, what goes better than jazz and potatoes?
Nothing.
Any other last one you want to mention before we go to break?
Moose on Frank's bar is great, but that's not dive. But
well, you know where I work. I don't think I can afford to go there.
You can get a martini. I think you can afford that.
Okay, I can afford a drink.
I'll get you one.
All right, it's killing me to have to cut this off to go to breaks because I feel like we could talk for like 3 hours and it would just disappear like that. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of very, very beloved, well-known people that we've lost with Alison Martino, Vintage LA.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
My guest is Alison Martino from Vintage LA. Now, when I knew I was going to start doing some hosting here, you were one of the very first people I wanted to talk to. Vintage LA is terrific. People need to visit your accounts on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X. I bet if I had your Rolodex, I would be spoiled for choice for guests for the rest of my natural life. Also, Rolodex, deep dive there. Nobody knows what the word Rolodex means. Tiffany?
I absolutely know.
Okay, Foosh, do you know what a Rolodex is?
I sure do.
Really?
Yeah.
I will bet you... Okay, you know where I work. I'm not going to bet you any money. I'll bet you Kiana doesn't know what a Rolodex is.
She probably doesn't.
Okay, let's just assume.
Wow.
Let's assume that I won that bet. Now, you've also been friends with a lot of well-known people, Alison, because you grew up in the entertainment industry with your father, who maybe people don't know about. Tell us about your father.
Who's my dad? No. My dad was a singer named Al Martino. You may have known him from The Godfather. He was Johnny Fontaine, but he was actually a singer in real life. So he was friendly with a lot of comics and entertainment people because they would like open for them back then. Like back then, Joan Rivers would open for, someone like my dad. And so I got to know a lot of really funny, amazing people. And we've lost so many of them. I mean, it's just astonishing how many are gone.
Let's get right into that. We lost James Darren today, and you knew him.
Yes. Yeah, my dad is from South Philly, and so was James. And those guys are, they're Italian singers from back then. It's Frankie Avalon, Eddie Fisher.
Yeah.
Even Chubby Checker's background, and so Frankie Avalon, thank God, he's okay. Everything's fine. But it's a very sad day, and James Darren passed away. It was a little bit, we didn't know that till today.
Now, he was, in his later 80s?
88. Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember James Darren from reruns. I'm not that old. Reruns of the Time Tunnel.
Yeah.
And I guess I am old enough to remember T.J. Hooker.
Well, that's not as old as Time Tunnel, but, a lot of people don't realize with James Darren, he directed some of those T.J. Hookers.
Yeah, I never knew that until you mentioned it.
Yeah.
But a lot of these people, including Darren, have such the scope and depth of their career. We had no idea. We know them for the things that they're best for. Mm-hmm. What else do you know about Darren, especially since you actually hung out with him in real life?
Well, that he was a director, and he was a pretty serious director. He did a lot of television. When you go into IMDb, he directed episodes of 90210. I don't think anybody knows that.
That is so incongruous.
Yeah, and obviously he was an entertainer on the road, but how cool to come back and star as in T.J. Hooker, be a character in T.J. Hooker, and direct T.J. Hooker. He had everything going for him. He was the most gorgeous man I've ever seen.
Not
He's
only
a
that, I
wizard.
guarantee
Yeah.
you that William Shatner was jealous of his hair. 'Cause
Hell yeah.
He had some he had some magnificent 80s feathered hair. I could never get mine to do that.
And he had it. I mean, he just continued to be gorgeous. Yeah.
And so what kind of guy was he like in real life?
He was fantastic. You know, he's a South Philly guy, so kind of tells you like it is, and street smart and funny, charming, and just a very, very nice guy. Really,
I saw a video of James Darren on YouTube showing somebody around some of his old haunts. I think someplace that maybe he was roommates with.
I shot that video.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that was yours?
Yeah, I
Okay.
took Jimmy
Small
around.
world.
Jimmy liked Greenblatt's a lot, which we lost that one.
Okay.
And he used to live in the apartment behind it with some of the old Sky Saxon and people like that. And
Wait, with who?
he had a lot of friends. He was friends with James Dean. James Dean hung out with
That's
him.
the name I was trying to remember. Yeah.
James Dean. Yeah, James Dean and him used to hang out at Googie's coffee shop across the street.
Good Lord. Okay.
I know. And so he took me to the apartment that they used to live in. It's still there. Isn't that amazing?
That
It's
is.
still there.
You are so lucky. And you were also lucky enough to be actual real life friends with Peter Marshall.
Oh, yes. And we lost him about 10 days ago.
Peter Marshall, for anybody who doesn't know, what he's best known for is being the longtime host of the Hollywood Squares. But again, this is another one, tip of the iceberg on this guy,
I know,
right?
yeah.
He did so much
my
stuff.
gosh.
He was a singer, he was an actor.
Yeah.
And I only knew a little bit of this. And then I listened to like an hour and a half interview with him on Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. And Gilbert's no longer with us, but they get into some of this stuff. I had no idea all the stuff that Peter Marshall did and how talented and versatile he was.
Well, he was the perfect host for Hollywood Squares, but he was also a singer and an entertainer. And you go into his house and you just cannot believe all the memorabilia on the wall.
I
It
want to
was
hear
just
about this
shocking
specifically.
to see that kind of stuff. I mean, I live for that stuff, and just picture galore and awards and Emmys, and he's so humble, and he would love to tell stories. He knew everyone. You know, he knew everybody. Fred Willard was a very good friend of his. I got to meet Fred through Peter, and Robert Morse was another great friend of Peter's.
Okay,
and
also gone.
That was an amazing dinner I got to have there, and they're all gone. It's really, really hard.
But you will have these memories for the rest of your life, and that is so amazing. So when you just were hanging out, having a meal and a drink with Peter Marshall, what was the evening like? What did you do?
Well,
what did you talk about?
That's the thing. You know, I live for history, so it was really nice to be able to go to Peter's house for dinner and just sit him down and ask him about Paul Lynn.
Yeah, did he have a bunch of...
Give me Paul Lynn stories. And I used to produce this show called Mysteries and Scandals, and I was doing a segment on Paul Lynn, and I could not afford to license Hollywood Squares. And Peter came to the rescue and gave me his outtakes from his personal collection. And I'm like, oh, look what I got. I don't have to license these.
The outtakes, how much of that could you actually use?
Oh, it was a lot of bleeping, a lot of beeping, but how fun, you know, and to see a little bit of Paul Lynn and his, you know, sort of.
Yeah, you read my mind that I wanted to talk about Paul Lynn because I've read, among other things, that Paul Lynn was a huge drunk and also kind of nasty when he got in his cups.
I asked Peter about it. I mean, he did say there were some horrific nights, but there was, that was his exact quote. Exact quote.
Details, please.
I don't think he got into details. That was enough. But I think that he also was great.
Well, he was hilarious.
But you could be Jekyll and Hyde. You know, alcoholics, they're Jekyll and Hyde at times. So they could be absolutely the best, and then they could just be a horror show. So.
I mean, Paul Lynn died at a fairly young age. I believe alone as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of got pigeonholed into that center square sort of syndrome, and I think it drove him crazy, and he wanted to do serious acting, and you know, he was on Bewitched, and he had his own show for a little while. The Paul Lynn show didn't get picked up, but I think he really wanted to go into serious acting, and maybe he could have, and I think he could have if he had gone into the 80s. I think there would have been a lot of parts for him.
I think we look at game shows a little differently now than we used to, and we don't look at them as like low rent things that stay-at-home moms watch. We look at them and realize how brilliant some of them were. Like, I'm a huge Match Game fan.
Yeah. They're fun to watch, aren't they, on the Game Show Network?
They're very fun, and they get away with some stuff that maybe went over our heads when we were kids.
They do. It is kind of shocking.
Okay, we're going to have to break here, but we're going to have a little bit more with Alison Martino from Vintage LA after the break. This is killing me. I feel like you're the first person I should have called when I moved here 6 years ago.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
Mark Ronner with Tiffany Hobbs in for Mo. And coming up in the 10 p.m. hour is Coast to Coast with George Noory. And we got George right here with us.
Hey, Mark. Hi, Tiff. How's everybody?
George, I'm usually the news anchor, and I'm sitting in for Mo. Is this bitterly disappointing for you tonight?
Absolutely not. You do a great job for KFI, my friend.
I'm recording that, and I'm playing it for everyone I know. George, what do you got going on tonight?
We're going to talk about miraculous healing techniques, and later on, a little bit of life after death on Coast to Coast.
So there is life after death?
Absolutely.
Well, I will be sure to listen. Great talking to you, George. We'll do it again.
See you in minutes.
And we still have Alison Martino here from Vintage LA. Let's, Alison, remind people of some things you've got coming up that they can consume.
Well, my bar series will air next Thursday if you have Spectrum News at 9, and it'll be all about the bars. And then I have an interview coming up with artist Ed Ruscha next week as well, who has an amazing exhibit right now at the Museum of Art. Everything he's ever done is there. So I highly recommend going because it's like only going to be there till October. Mm-hmm. And my Houdini Estate show airs on Halloween. I know that's a while back from here, but I'm really excited about it.
Oh, it's spooky season already. As soon as September hits.
No, you are 100% talking my language. Now tell us more about the Houdini stuff.
So it's a mansion, and it literally is right there in Laurel Canyon, and it was built by a man named Ralph Walker, and he was a friend of Harry Houdini. And it's been sitting up there since the early 1900s. Some of it had burned down, but it has been restored and rebuilt on. And it has caves and hidden tunnels and terraced gardens. And Houdini kind of used the property he kind of practiced his magic there and used the pool. And it's got a lot of spirits because I'm telling you, I was there. I was there in the day, and I was freaked out. You can feel it. And I'm a native, and I'm kind of a hard sell. Like, oh, really, really? Okay. No, it's fantastic. And maybe one day it'll be open to the public, which I think it's going to happen soon.
All right, this is important for you to know, Alison. My last name is Ronner, Rahner. And you know who shared that last name?
Tell me. I think I know. But
Houdini's wife, right. Bess Ronner.
Bessie, yeah.
So I can't prove this. I don't have like Maury Povich here to verify anything. But I'm just going to say that I'm related to Houdini. And anybody who wants to dispute that, that's on them. So I believe I should have access to this place. Now, we were talking about places around LA that have gone extinct, and I wanted to tell you about the Captain's Table because I don't think a lot of people remember that the skipper from Gilligan's Island had a restaurant in LA called the Captain's Table. Wasn't it some kind of a lobster joint or something?
It was a lobster joint, and it was on Restaurant Row.
Okay.
And it was right next to Xavier Cugat had a restaurant too called Cugat's.
Of course.
And you know who performed there? If we're because we're really old here, is
the
Charo.
Coochie girl.
Oh, Charo.
Charo Gucci. It was his wife. So what a cool spot, like neighborhood, to have those two right near each other.
Now, is Restaurant Row La Cienega? Are we talking
This was a little bit north of that, above Melrose.
Okay.
So this is the saddest thing you're ever going to hear, though. And I'm not making any of this up. When I was really, really young, like, geez, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, my mom and my stepdad took me to the Captain's Table. Of course, every kid back in the day, you watch Gilligan's Island. It's the law. You have to. And my dad was connected somehow, and he brought the skipper to the table, and I was terrified. I was so terrified that, I'm not kidding you, I dove under the table. And I wouldn't come out, and I wouldn't say anything because it's the skipper, and he couldn't have been nicer. So I'm hearing from outside the table, first of all, it's my mom. It's like, Mark, get out of there, Mark. But then I'm also hearing the skipper talking to me like I'm Gilligan, and he's going, hey, it's okay, little buddy, come on out. Little buddy, it's the skipper. Come on out. And I was petrified. I could not do it because I was just cripplingly shy. And to this day, I'm bitter that I didn't come out and like have him slap me with his hat or something like Gilligan.
That is blowing my mind. Oh my gosh.
But look at who I'm talking to. You must have a million stories like that from growing up in the business.
But that's a great story. because that was one of your favorite shows, and he's coming to your table, and there he is, and you're under the table.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like.
I mean, my dad knew Paul Frees. You know, he was the voice of the Haunted Mansion, and he did that for me as a little girl. And I went under the table. I get to go under the table for that. That's scary. I don't know about the skipper, but
Right.
No. For people who don't know who Paul Frees was, he had one of the most magnificent and instantly recognizable voices in all of entertainment. In fact, just last weekend, I watched a movie on Tubi called Dark of the Sun, and I thought, this German guy's voice is dubbed, hey, that's Paul Frees. I would recognize that anywhere. You knew this guy?
is this room actually stretching? I mean, I had him do that for me at dinner once.
Oh, my
I mean, I
God.
really was terrified.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was
Do it
very,
again, do it
very,
again, do
very.
it
And
again.
then once he did it like 5 or 6 times, I realized it was a character he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then I would go to Disney World or Disneyland and go, I know him. And,
That is amazing. Well, we're just about out of time here. Allison, I cannot thank you enough for being my guest on our second night. And if we haven't burned the joint to the ground, maybe you can come back again sometime. I want to thank everybody. Tiffany, thank you so much for everything and for making. You ever see one of those James Brown concerts where Brown kind of feigns that he's fading in the middle of the show?
You want to put the cape on you right now? Is that what we're doing?
I
Put
need
the cape on you?
I need the cape. Thank you to Foosh, to Kiana, to, of course, Jackie Ray. Thank you to Robin. And, of course, Chris Little. I'll be back in the news chair tomorrow, and I believe we're going to be filling in again here the following Monday night. So it's anybody's guess who we'll have as a guest. And thank you, listeners, especially the ones who sent me some really nice emails with some kind words. Very much appreciated. We'll see you next time. We'll see you tomorrow. Mark Ronner, Tiffany Hobbs, KFI AM 640, live everywhere on the iHeart app. It's Later with Mo Kelly.
You've been listening to Later with Mo Kelly. You can always hear us live on KFI AM 640, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. every Monday through Friday, and anytime on demand on the iHeartRadio app.